It's all good. It's all good. What it is, and I'll explain it, Leo, to not embarrass anybody. It's a little longer than usual intentionally, so it gives plenty of people time to join.
Okay.
So that's what it is. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Hey, you dorks, this is Gunnar Hansen, Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and you are listening to The Dorkening.
Hi, I'm Brian Johnson, and although you probably accidentally stumbled across it and have no idea why you're watching it, you are in fact watching The Dorkening.
Hello, this is Tom Kenny, voice actor, the voice of the Ice King on Adventure Time, and SpongeBob SquarePants. Ah, meow. Oh, Gary the Snail, too. Hey, guess what you're filling your eye holes and ear holes with? The Dorkening! Oh, I love the Dorkening. Very popular in Ooh and Bikini Bottom.
Hi, I'm Lou Ferrigno. You're watching The Dorkening. And you know what? You don't like me when I get angry, so don't get me angry. You better keep watching The Dorkening.
Hey guys, this is Felissa Rose, and you're watching The Dorkening.
Hey guys, it's Courtney Palm. We're shooting Death House, and you're watching The Dorkening.
This is Anthony Michael Hall, and you're watching The Dorkening. Stay tuned. My friends are going to show you what entertainment's all about, baby.
The Dorkening.
The Dorkening and all affiliated shows are not intended for anyone under the age of 18. The following may contain discussions or scenes that have adult situations, graphic violence, nudity, strong sexual content, and graphic language. This show is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised.
Rise and shine, my sinners. When Father Evil starts his day, he gets a little deadly. Deadly Grounds coffee has the richest, smoothest flavor you'll find anywhere. It's sinfully delicious. Once you go deadly, you never go back. Order yours at getdeadly.com. Coffee's so good, it's scary.
I wish I had a series of clips of just RW replicating all that. Okay, so my name's Leo. I'm the monkey behind the keyboard here. You're watching Creator Spotlight, powered by the Dork podcast episode. You know what I meant to say. Anyway, we got a kick-ass episode for you today. As always, Philip, how's it going, bud?
Hey, Leo, how's it going? Glad to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you, as always. RW.
What's up, people? How you doing?
Doing. And Steven from Super Retro, how's it going?
Good, everyone. How is everyone? See, I'm messing up my words today too.
That's okay. Steven, I'm gonna put you on the spot because you brought us an awesome guest tonight. Who did you bring with you?
So, yes, I brought this to the Creator Spotlight. This gentleman, he is a Connecticut indie director. He is one of the people. He took. We're going to be probably one of the big things we're going to be talking about. But he took a 30-year-old movie with no sound, no music, and restored it with, kick-ass music, a kick-ass cast for a modern age. So without further ado, here's our guest. Connecticut indie film director Kurtis Spieler.
Hey, how's everybody doing? Thank you for having me.
Hey, doing great. Thanks for joining us, Kurtis. And obviously the movie Steven's talking about, New York Ninja, and which I just watched last night. And as soon as I finished watching it, I grew up with all when the ninja movies exploded. And RW and Philip, you can certainly chime in on this as well. It was so many cheesy ninja movies, and I loved them all. American Ninja, Jim Cotta. What are some of the other ones? But I mean, this here feels like it fits right in. And as soon as I watched it, I texted my friend. I said, "Holy shit, you need to go watch New York Ninja now." What brought you to this movie?
Yeah, well, that's actually a very long story. I can give you the abridged version, and then we can go into more detail as we go on. But so I work for a company called Vinegar Syndrome, which for anybody who isn't familiar with the company, we're a film restoration and preservation company, and so we specialize in restoring film prints. We get the original camera negatives, all that kind of stuff, and then we clean them up and re-release them on either Blu-ray, UHD, whatever. So we have a big film archive here, and in our film archive, we basically discovered that we had all the unedited camera rolls for a movie called New York Ninja, which was originally shot in 1984. And after some time, I convinced the owners maybe we should take a look at this footage and see what we had. So we scanned in a couple of the reels to take a look at it. And as soon as we started seeing it, we were like, oh, whoa, what is this? It was pretty crazy. For anybody who's seen the movie, you would understand our first initial reaction seeing the footage. So we got very excited about this. The only problem was all the sound elements had been lost over the years. And so I took on the task of basically editing this unfinished movie from '84. I edited it back together, no script, nothing to really work off of. All I had was the slate basically to go by, and even that didn't help, which I'm sure we'll get into more as we go on. But basically, I edited a new version of the movie, and I wrote new dialogue and brought in some of our favorite genre actors from Vinegar Syndrome to come in and dub the voices. And a band called Voyager 3 did the score for the movie, and it just was released a few months ago, and people really seem to be enjoying it. So,
yeah. Sorry. Go ahead, Philip.
I was going to ask. Do you have the history behind the film? Why it just sat on the shelf, never was completed, and whatnot?
Yeah, well, we've been able to learn some over time. So actually, for anybody that has picked up the Blu-ray disc, there's about a 45-minute behind the scenes featurette where we tried to chronicle the original production. We try to learn as much as we could. There's an actor named John Liu. He made some kung fu movies in the 70s. He mostly did acting, but in the late 70s, early 80s, him and I believe it was his wife, they started their own production company in Europe, and he started directing his own movies. And for anybody who's seen the movies that John Liu has directed and starred in, they're quite something. it takes a certain audience to appreciate them. But I guess this was his chance to make an American film, and this company called 21st Century Distribution. They mostly specialize in releasing movies theatrically, and they had a lot of luck with kung fu films and that kind of stuff. And they eventually got into doing original productions, and this is one of 21st Century's original productions. They hired John Liu to come in and direct and star in it, and it was very low budget, and there were a lot of issues kind of on set, just in terms of I don't think there was a lot of planning. Let's just put it that way. We've heard some stories from the people that we did find from the original production, and there was a script written, but it was like it didn't really make any sense. They didn't even use the script on set. They just were kind of making up scenes as they went along. And then, I really can't say for sure what happened, but they were shooting in the end of 84, and then in 85, 21st Century Distribution went bankrupt. And so I think after that, it had gotten shopped around a little bit to Canon and eventually to Troma. But I think everybody saw that, maybe the quality wasn't quite what they were hoping it would be. And I think maybe the sound elements had been missing at that point, so nobody really wanted to put the work in to finish it. So, it took 35 years before, Vinegar Syndrome, we took an interest in it and were able to finish it. So, yeah, it's the brief history of the original production. I'm sure we'll talk more about it as we go along, but it was mostly just money issues that I think, that's why it didn't get finished.
So we do have the trailer. I'm going to play this. And so New York Ninja is available through Vinegar Syndrome's website right now. So is it VOD and physical media or just physical media?
Just physical media right now, and we're doing a theatrical run. So it's playing in a lot of cities. We're also actually doing a 35 millimeter print, which is playing at some cities. There'll probably be VOD and streaming down the road, but Vinegar Syndrome is very much a physical media company, so we like to push that as much as possible.
Very cool. Totally. Yeah. We're all media collectors here. So it's physical media above all else, but here we go.
Abductions of young women are still being reported. Another woman with mysterious radiation burns has been discovered.
We're gonna have a baby.
Oh my God.
I can't believe that John's wife was murdered.
You have to try and pull yourself together.
This city owes me.
Well, what's that?
Justice. Why won't anyone do anything?
We are strong on crime, and together we have the power.
This is a big city. We're doing what we can.
Dude, what happened? Is he okay? What? Oh, what? Shit.
Tell the others, I'm coming for them.
I need you to help me.
I would, but I want them dead.
Crime has remained at an all-time low thanks to ninja fever.
We're going live with this. These men murdered her because of what she saw. It's linked to these abductions.
There's something weighing us down. It's that damn ninja.
New York Ninja's a real hero.
I absolutely love it. So we got links in the show notes up above or down below, depending on where you're watching or listening. Just while that was playing, I just had to grab this. So, Philip, RW, were you following the ninja craze when you're, in the 80s?
Yeah, I mean, you said Gymkata and you said something.
American Ninja. I just want to show you.
There was like the kickboxer movies. Yeah, and I think I had some of those. They never stuck to anything.
Oh yeah. So this year I've held on since the 80s when I was a little kid. It's just you wanted to be a ninja, but
yeah,
I love these.
Again, I remember all that stuff back in, like I say, the 80s. That's just cool. That's like finding a just any movie really, but like that'd be like that's just so cool that you found this movie and you had to figure out how to make this thing work. So that's thumbs up for that, like with nothing to go by. I worked on a movie with somebody, and unfortunately they passed away, and never got a chance to edit their movie. And so somebody gave that movie to somebody else and said, can you edit this for them? And it's been like 5-6 years and no one's edited this movie together yet. But it must be hard to edit somebody else's thing without knowing where these pieces go. So, that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it was quite the process. I don't know how much you want to get into that now. Do you want to save that, or you want me to start rambling? Because I could talk for a while about how it all went down. So
yeah, let's you feel free to ramble.
Yeah, so the question I get the most is like, how were you able to do this? And luck, maybe, to some extent. I don't really know. Basically we had the footage, we scanned it all in digitally, so I got all the digital files, and really for the first probably couple of months, it was actually just me going through all the footage and cataloging it. All I had was the slate to go off of. So I'd go through and I'd find here's scene 4, here's all the shots that say scene 4, let's put them aside. And as I did that, I just basically started getting a feel for at least the basic idea of the movie. I mean, it's a simple vigilante story. It's nothing too crazy, but for anybody who's seen the movie, there's a lot of kind of crazy characters and a lot of stuff that's happening. And, like I said before, John Liu was kind of known for making movies that didn't make a lot of sense to begin with. So, so I had to sit there and basically go through this footage and get a feel for it. But as I was doing that, I was taking notes on everything, and I was starting to learn which scenes were finished. Because that was the other thing, is we didn't know how much was actually finished. We had heard mixed things. A gentleman named Arthur Schweitzer, he was one of the original producers for New York Ninja. He used to own 21st, or he was one of the owners for 21st Century Distribution. He's who we ended up getting the movie from. And he had told us that the ending wasn't finished. So we were like, okay, great. How much of the movie isn't finished? So, I had to go through and kind of try to figure out what were these scenes. Were they finished? Were they not? And, that's the hard part, because I had nobody there to help me with that. So it's maybe to me, what might have looked like an unfinished scene, maybe they had some kind of intention for that I don't know. Maybe it was supposed to be part of a montage, maybe not. I don't know. So that was really the hard part. But once we basically realized that there was no way to restore it to its original version, it kind of gave me the freedom to do with it as I saw fit. And that's why, if you look at the credits, John Liu is the original director and I'm credited as redirector. I think I might be the only person to ever have a redirector credit, which is kind of cool. But we honestly didn't know what else to say, because I had to take this footage and I had to creatively see it through to the finish line. And so, I was making the creative choices to finish this thing beyond just editing. It was also working with the actors, and it was working with the music department and the guys who were doing all the sound work, so there was a lot of creative choices that were made. And really, bottom line, it was just trying to make everything work and tell the most coherent story that I could tell with the footage that was there. So that's kind of the short version of the process.
Now, you said 20. What's the name of the original?
21st Century Distribution.
So since that disbanded, do you now own the rights to this, or does somebody else still own the rights and you co-own it? And when you make sales, do you have to pay somebody, or is it yours now? How does that work if it was somebody else's who shot all this or whatever?
Well, so that's actually a good question, because that's how we ended up acquiring it. So when Vinegar Syndrome started, one of the things that the company does is, they'll find producers or companies that maybe have gone defunct and the rights have reverted back to either the filmmakers or the producers. And, we'll try to get the rights to, license the films and re-release them. And so one of the owners here, Ralph Stevens, he knew Arthur Schweitzer, who owned 21st Century, and he basically made a deal with him to purchase a bunch of films that Arthur still owned the rights to after 21st Century went defunct. And I guess when Ralph went to go pick up all the this palette of films, they were going through the inventory, and as they found these boxes labeled New York Ninja. And Ralph had said this is the story that Ralph told, is that he said to Arthur, what's this movie New York Ninja? We didn't ask for this. And Arthur said, well, yeah, it's a movie that we started shooting in the 80s and we never finished it. And so, you guys can have it. You can do what you want with it.
Wow.
He actually said you guys could throw it away if you want, which I am so glad it did not get thrown away. But they wouldn't have thrown it away here because, we're a preservation company. So, like, we at least have to know what something is before, deciding whether or not we don't throw things away. I'll be honest. Like, if you saw the building, we don't throw things away. But yeah. So, we got the rights from Arthur. So Vinegar Syndrome now owns the rights to the movie.
Nice.
So, yeah.
So whatever happens from here is all you. That's great.
Yes. Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
So you had if you all saw the trailer, obviously, that we just saw, you have the voice cast of, iconic people like Cynthia Rothrock, Michael Berryman, Linnea Quigley. I know I've interviewed you before, but I didn't get to ask you this question. Was it difficult in getting the voices for them for this movie during a pandemic?
Actually, not really. We actually got really lucky in that sense because so we had finished the edit and the sound design was being worked on through a company called 3 Beep out of New York. So they were doing all of the sound effects work and all that kind of stuff. And at the beginning of, I guess it would have been 2020, right? That's when the pandemic hit hard.
2020 March.
Yeah, exactly. So we were just casting the voice talent at that point, and then the pandemic hit, and everything kind of got stalled out. So we waited for a little bit because really the plan initially was for me, we were going to book a bunch of people in New York and then book a bunch of people out in LA. And then I was going to go to New York, which is close by to Vinegar Syndrome. And then I was going to fly out to LA. And so I could sit in on all the sessions and, work with the actors and all that kind of stuff. But obviously that didn't happen. And then what did happen though, was over time, especially sound studios got really good at working remotely, and much like podcasts and stuff that are happening now, there was a lot of like innovations made in a short amount of time. And so what happened was that summer, basically, when we had that lull in the pandemic, things started to kind of open back up again. And what ended up happening was the way we would do it was 3 Beep in New York. They were the main hub, and then we would find a studio that was closest to the talent. And so the talent would go to that studio, and then we would remote link to, like 3 Beep would remote link with that studio. And then I would be here at Vinegar Syndrome and I would remote link with everybody. And so we could all see the video, we could all see the actor in the booth, or hear them. And, we could do playback and record. And so it was actually, it was one of the few things that you could do at that time because, a lot of other productions were still shut down, but there was still a lot of voice work and cartoons and stuff like that were being done. And so people got really good at working remotely. And it actually helped because what it did was open up the ability for us to get talent in places that we weren't originally going to get talent. So like Ginger Lynn, she was an addition later on. She was in Nevada, and Vince Murdocco, he was in Canada. And actually Michael Berryman was in Florida. So it's like we then were able to cast people that weren't just in New York and LA. So in a weird way, it actually might have helped the production in some way.
Wow.
Now you said you had no script, so how did you know what these people were saying originally? You do some really good lip reading, or did you make up a whole new script?
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't know if I'd say really good lip reading, but I did do some lip reading. So the performances are really big, and so if I could read the lips, I used that. But knowing that this was like sort of a campy, cheesy 80s ninja movie, it really gave me the freedom to, dub it kind of any way that I wanted to. Now, here's the thing, like I really didn't want to make the movie a joke, but knowing the films of that era, I kind of knew what I could and couldn't get away with. And so one of the things was now that we were editing this new version, I had to kind of tie up tie scenes together in the order that I was putting them. And so, I made the decision early on that if I could read the lips, I would try to use that the best that I could. And then when I couldn't, I would just try to match the syllables closely so that I could get across the information that I needed to transition from scene to scene. So it's a little bit of a mix of both. And honestly, I was kind of going for like initially, sort of like a kung fu type vibe where, a lot of kung fu movies, the chopsaki or whatever you want to call them, where they, they're overdubbed and you can tell that they don't match up. I was going in with the inspiration of that initially, but actually what ended up being a bigger inspiration was a lot of the Italian films that would end up being shot in America. You'd have stuff from like Lucio Fulci and a little bit of Dario Argento, that kind of stuff. And you would have a mix of actors. Some were speaking Italian, some were speaking English, and then they would overdub everybody. And so like within a scene, you might have an Italian speaking to somebody speaking English, and the Italian was dubbed in English, but then so was the English was dubbed in English. So it gives it this weird kind of bizarre feel where it's like, and actually I use that as kind of more inspiration than anything else. And so it actually kind of has this like weird, like European New York vibe to it. So, which, is actually something that people have brought up to me. So I think that's pretty cool. So
well, you did an amazing job on it, because it definitely has, the feels of the movies of that era, and it's just the quality is just amazing. Absolutely loved it. And it definitely, it was a little odd, definitely seeing like the Twin Towers. We're always going to get that feeling in any older movies, but this really brought back feelings of like New York of the 80s. People forget how bad it was. I remember driving through, I was brought down to, we went to Disney World in the 80s, and we drove through, and just driving through New York, I remember seeing like burnt cars and stuff like that. It was just really bad. Any of you guys drive through New York in the 80s?
No, we always did the Tappan Zee and went around the city. Yeah.
I flew to New York in '86 and actually went to the top of the Trade Center, not the top outside floor, but the top inside floor. So that was kind of cool. Put my head against the glass, and you could feel the building moving. Yeah. It was like the weirdest thing. But yeah, I know what you mean. We ate at a Howard Johnson's at Times Square, and anytime Tracy and I watched those, like, there's a name for them, and all I can think of is killer movies. Those, like serial killers. What are they?
Giallo.
But like the
Giallo serial killer.
Like the freaking killers from New York City or whatever movies, and it shows footage from like the 70s, 80s. I'm like, oh my God, this is like another piece of time that no longer exists. So the trailer that I watched, I was like, wait, how did they film this? With like, this looks like they filmed it in the 80s, which now that I know the story, yeah, they did. But yeah, that time period, the 70s and 80s, was so different than anything now. So yeah, I didn't get a chance to watch it because, I didn't.
It was
but I will watch it for sure.
Oh, go on. I'm sorry.
No, I'm done.
Yeah, go for it, Phil.
It's a thing back in those days. When I went to New York City with my parents. My parents were smart enough to avoid those sections. However, if you watch Scorsese's Taxi Driver or whatever, everybody knows Times Square with the dirty movies and as our guest said, all these Italian slasher grindhouse films and whatever, and then the black and white ones from the 60s from the Finleys and all that. So. It was all pretty bad, and then it was cleaned up by Giuliani, as we know, and it's a little different now. But yeah, there's no doubt that New York City was always known as this underground, dirty, grimy place. When I worked at a gas station as a kid, these Australian folk came, and they were talking about how they were going up and down the coast for vacation, and I said, "Yeah, New York City, it's not too good." They go, "Yeah, it's a horrible place." So, and that was back in the 80s. So this film here, based off of what I was able to see earlier this afternoon, as well as the trailers we saw here, you definitely get that feel for sure. And it's a midnight movie for sure, and based off restoration and the quality of the print. I mean, I was flabbergasted how great the quality of the print is. But then again, Vinegar Syndrome, you guys do a great job when restoring film. So well done, Kurtis. Well done.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Well,
I need to come see your stuff because, like, again, I do independent films, and just to see how you feed all that. Obviously, it came on 35 millimeter film, right? And you have some kind of thing that brings it into a computer and copies every frame or whatever. So that must have taken forever to do. But yeah, I'd love to see how that process works. But that's just, that's phenomenal. And the fact that you had to, like, okay, this is this scene, like that. Just the undertaking must have been insane. So, like, if nothing else, obviously be wicked proud of this accomplishment. I mean, you edited and wrote a movie that was already filmed. Like, it's somebody filmed a movie that you had to then write and put together. So, like, that just is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's pretty surreal. I mean, it's hard because, like, sometimes I only feel like it's half my movie, so it's like, it's weird. I'm going out to these screenings and I'm doing Q&As, and obviously I talk a lot about, like, the process that I went through in order to put this movie together. But it's hard because, like, I get a lot of credit, which is great, makes me feel good, but at the same time it's weird because it's not like 100% my movie. But I just keep telling people, like, I'm so glad to be part of this project. I mean, I grew up watching movies like this, and I grew up watching movies from John Liu. So to be able to finish a movie like this, and really to be part of, like, a new cult film, I mean, it's kind of hit cult status almost quicker than I thought it would. And when people try to go out and make a cult film, it doesn't really work. Like, you have a few here and there that actually hit, but really the true cult films, the true midnight films, they're usually from the past. There's not too many modern ones made these days, but, like, all of a sudden here's a new one that nobody knew about. So really, to be part of, like, what people are calling a cult movie is, like, it's just so cool. It's basically, I keep telling people, it's almost like going back in time and making an 80s movie, which I wish I could do, and now this is, like, the closest thing that I could do. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, people, Stranger Things and all these other, flashback movies or whatever that try to do, oh, this was set in 80, this was set in 70, even though they try. The buildings have changed. The atmosphere has changed. Nothing is the same. So you get a little piece of what it was like, but it's never quite like being there in the 70s and 80s. So you're exactly right. You can't really go back, but to have somebody go, hey, here's a couple 70s and 80s movies that never got finished. Why don't you do something with them? It's like, oh my God, that's awesome,
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah, well, it played the 35 print played at because like I said, we struck a 30, like, once it was finished, you can buy the Blu-ray and all that, and it's screening digitally, but we also actually struck a 35 millimeter print, which you can go and see. So that's pretty cool. So it played at the Roxy in New York City a few weeks back, and I got to go out to that screening to do some Q&As, and that was one of the questions that I got a lot, was the Twin Towers, and not that anybody had a problem with it. To be honest, most people were glad to see them in a film again. But the movie, like, literally opens with a shot of the Twin Towers, and then it like tilts down from the top of the Twin Towers to, like, our main characters. And everybody asked, was that intentionally done on my part when it came to the edit? And, like, yes. The answer is basically yes. Like, that seemed to be the opening shot of the movie for me, but I purposely didn't. I held the credits till a little bit later. There's, like, an art card that sets up, oh, it's 1984, blah blah blah, at the beginning, but the very first shot is the Twin Towers. And I that was a choice because I wanted people to know right away that this is an 80s movie, and New York is just as much of a character in the film as the film itself. And that was one of the things that people talked about a lot. And actually, another quick funny story, at the screening at the Roxy, one of the original on-set producers, a man by the name Joseph Zwick, actually came to the screening. And that was, like, so cool because he was there every day on set. And he told me that his family him and his wife both worked on the film, and they had talked about it for like years afterwards and always wondered what happened to it. And the family didn't even believe that it was real at some point. So for like 35 years later, for him to actually see this thing put together, he was so complimentary, which was super cool. But he actually made a joke. He's like, man, seeing New York in the 80s, I remember, I believe it was him who said, I remember I'd gotten bugged twice, in the city. And, if you were there long enough, you were bound to get mugged at some point. So, there definitely was a reputation to the city, and if you watch the movie, the punks, the bad guys, they're like way over the top. But there is some truth to it, because like no matter what you look around, you see New York in the 80s, which is super cool. You see the subway covered in graffiti. Like that was legit. That's how it was then,
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, what's pretty crazy is this is actually the third movie we've covered where it was filmed in the 80s, never finished, and then recently got finished up. This year is by far the best of the three, but the others two were pretty good too. It was, I think, Grizzly 2 and Siegfried's Brain.
That one I'm not familiar with.
The original filmmakers ran out of money in the 80s and held on to the original canisters. And obviously, years ahead of time, one of them works for Disney now, and actually had somebody at Skywalker Ranch work on the sound and stuff like that. It's a really cool movie if you get a chance to check it out. It's has a long title, but it's Siegfried's Brain is the main part of it.
Okay, yeah, no, I'll definitely check that out, because there's a few other things people have kind of referenced other movies Grindhouse releasing. They put out Gone with the Pope, which was done in the 70s, but that was a movie that the filmmaker had passed away and it was never finished, and the guys at Grindhouse decided to finish it. So but the sound was there and all that kind of stuff. There are some similarities. There have been other movies similar, but nothing quite like New York Ninja. I think it's definitely the first of its kind, which is really, like I said, for me, just really cool to be a part of.
Now, I have a question for you. So you mentioned screenings, and the initial screening for this was at Beyond Fest in California. We're showing this film to the people at Beyond Fest. How did you present the film? Did you give them a pitch? Did you say, hey, we restored this film, can we show it at Beyond Fest? Or did they extend the invitation to you, and did they catch wind of what was going on?
Well, so we have a reputation with Beyond Fest. We know the guys who run it, and Vinegar Syndrome, because we do rep screenings for our films. So some of the restorations, will premiere their places, other festivals like Beyond Fest. So we have a reputation with these guys. I don't remember exactly how it came about. I think we kind of reached out to them. They were like, hey, send it to us, and we sent it to them, and they were like, yes, 100%, we're playing this. So so it just kind of worked out. We had an idea that we wanted to premiere it at Beyond Fest, because first of all, at the time, festivals were just starting to start back up again, and we were like, well, we would like to premiere it at a festival, and really Beyond Fest was kind of the right one. It's a super cool festival. This guy named Evram, he does a lot of the programming for it, and when we sent it to him, he was just like, this is my favorite movie of the year, because it's just, sure, there might be better movies, more well-made movies, but something that it covers both the restoration side of things for the film lovers, but is also really campy and fun and entertaining. It covers both sides of things. So they were very happy to have us play it, and it was really cool. It was really cool. That was actually, for me, it was the first time I was out in LA for this screening, and I had never been out to LA, and I'd always said that I wanted to go out for one of my movies. And so that actually worked out. So I went out to LA for the first time to go see this thing screen at Beyond Fest, and man, I was nervous.
And then you guys would take it back out to LA again, and you take Tarantino's theater, right?
Yeah. So now that it's played out, now I've been out to LA a couple of times. So, but yeah, I played at the 35 print actually premiered at the New Beverly, which is Tarantino's theater. So that was also super cool.
Now, two things. One, how do you take it from a digital copy and then put it back onto film once it's done? How do you do the reverse process?
There's companies that handle. We don't do that in house. I couldn't tell you exactly how the process works, but there are companies that will.
Gotcha. Now. I was like, wow, I can see you can, but the opposite haven't. But and just to comment on the tower thing. Yeah, just to comment on the tower thing with my hat off, for respect for all those lives that were lost at the towers. I don't think that we should forget the towers. No. And I think that's what happened when they took them out of the Spider-Man movie and they took them out of here, and it's we need to remember that they were there. So it's very cool to me that we can see them again because they were beautiful buildings, so to me that's cool that not only did you restore a movie and you restored New York in the 80s or whatever, but there's the towers, and we should never forget that they were there, and I think when that all went down, we just were like, oh my God, we can't show the towers anymore. But it's just the opposite. We need to never forget that or whatever. Like I say, respect to all those lives that were lost. But,
no, I agree. And that was actually, again, I was kind of curious what the reaction to that would be, especially when we were in New York. And that was almost pretty much the reaction everybody had. And that's how we felt. I mean, I understand that like in the initial fallout from, the Twin Towers, that, I can understand sort of the knee-jerk reaction to remove it from movies because it was so, it was so fresh in people's minds at the time. But yeah, I agree. It almost kind of, in retrospect, did a disservice, now that time has been removed. So, and again, with Vinegar Syndrome, with the movies we put out, a lot of 70s, 80s New York films. And it's like, when you see the Twin Towers, it's just so iconic. Like, it's New York by that skyline. And, it's kind of really good to be able to give tribute to that again.
I mean, I was always a fan of the Chrysler Building, but the Twin Towers, you see them, you know where you are, Right. My last question, because I know everybody wants to talk, but I have ADHD and I forget questions, but how do you guys, and I mentioned this and Leo's like, save it for the show. How do you differ from Shout Factory in your restoration process? And, how do you guys differ between them and what you do and what they do?
I mean, to be 100% honest, I'm not quite sure how their restoration process happens. Vinegar Syndrome is like a very DIY company. There's not a lot of people who work here. There's like maybe 20 of us. And that's like with shipping, that's with like management, that's with restoration. So there's really only a few of us that do the restoration. So, somebody like Shout Factory, they're a bigger company, so I'm not quite sure. I'm sure they do some in-house. I'm sure they do also outsource, but we keep everything in-house here. I mean, I wear a lot of hats here, like most of the people who work here. But one of the things I do is restoration, and there's like 3 of us really right now at this point that are like on restoration. It's like, between our other work, we're restoring everything.
Right. So you scan a negative in, let's say, and the color's off. You fix that color so that it's perfect. If there's a blemish or some weird like hair thing, you try to figure out how to fix that. Is that what you're saying by restoration?
Yeah. So yes. Well, the color specifically. So one of our supervisors and one of the owners of Vinegar Syndrome is Ryan Emerson. He oversees the color, and the color is he used to be a colorist. Color is one of those things that we will outsource sometimes, but we do the actual like cleaning up. So what happens is when the film gets scanned and brought in digitally, there'll be a lot of dirt and a lot of wear and tear. and we'll go in and clean, like digitally remove the dirt and clean things up and try to get the hairs are actually one of the hardest things to get out when it comes to like, because they're on the frame, they're on multiple frames in a row, which is really hard to remove. But we try to do our best. Vinegar Syndrome, I don't know if it's fortunately or unfortunately deal with a lot of films that have sort of been forgotten over time. And so, we're dealing with things that are generally in pretty rough shape. And we do our best to clean them up the best we can. Not to say anything, this is no way or me saying anything bad about Shout Factory or anything, because I think they do good work, but they're dealing with newer films a lot of times. So if you're putting out I Know What You Did Last Summer or something like that, or Urban Legend, I don't think they did I Know What You Did anyway. If you're putting out like Urban Legend, that movie was taken care of, and is in probably pretty decent shape, whereas some of the films we put out, man, they were stored in garages and, in basements and all the worst places for some films to get stored. And so, we have to do our best to try to make them as pretty as we can.
And that's frame by frame.
Yeah.
So an hour and a half movie is how many frames?
Like 20,000.
So 20,000 frames, let's say. You got to fix this one and then move on to the next one. And fix that one. The only reason I'm asking is I actually got something from Shout Factory, and it looked like they just took the VHS and threw it on a Blu-ray and said, here's the Blu-ray edition of this movie, which is why I asked what was different. And it already sounds like what's different is you go frame by frame to make it as best as it can possibly be.
RW to stick up for another company. It all depends on the specific film. It's not all the films, because I know Vinegar Syndrome has had to do that with a few of their blaxploitation, where I know you guys released one where there's like 3 on 1 disc because they just weren't good enough to release as singles. But the point is if that's the best quality you got and all the only quality you got, that's what they're going to release, and they try their best. And sometimes the Blu-ray quality just isn't going to, look as good as you would hope, but at least you get an opportunity to see it in 4K or whatever, 2K or whatever it's called, with at least in its best condition, and actually even get to see the film. So just to be fair, and again, it's different films. Like you said, Curtis, Urban Legend looks fantastic. Again, that was well kept. It came from a main studio, while some obscure film that was just sitting in a basement, like one of those something weird films.
Yeah.
Plan 9 from outer space.
Well, no, even other stuff like that. So and it just depends on which copy you get, what film you find, and sometimes you can't even find the original master. So
well, that's a big part of it. So for people listening who don't understand, there's a big difference between the original camera negative and a film print. And so we try to get back to the original camera negative if possible, because that's going to be your cleanest, best version and your highest quality. And so prints were copies of copies sometimes, and so certain films, the original camera negatives might be lost to time, and so all you have is a print. And if you're working with a print, you're already starting like way back. So
3 steps behind.
So you have to work like twice as hard. And sometimes like you'll have these ones where we're just like, listen, it's the best version that we could put out. Occasionally we've had to do video inserts. We tried to avoid that as much as possible because we want to do all film. But I believe it was The Undertaker where there was just some parts that were just
lost, except on VCR, right?
Yeah, and so we had to find tape masters and take it from the tape masters. So unfortunately, actually, Hard Rock Zombies that just came out recently, we had to take some of the gore shots from video masters just because it had been cut and all the cut stuff was lost. So
wow.
Well, that brings up a question for something that's been debated for a little bit, is to dorkify this just a little bit. Talking about recreation of original films or remastering of original films. What are your thoughts on like a movie like Star Wars, where we're never going to see the original one. And then you have these fans that are, you have like 4K 77 where they found an original, film, and they're cleaning that up. What are your thoughts on the fans like trying to do that where a company won't release an original movie?
I mean, well, first of all, to go for the Star Wars thing, it's funny. I was just having this conversation. So my nephew, he's 13, and we were kind of talking just yesterday about like what digital censorship, how like with streaming platforms and all this other kind of stuff, if you don't have the physical media, they can alter the digital file very easily. And so, this obviously with Star Wars, the original versions you really can't get anymore because now all that's really out there is the ones where they've been digitally altered. And that's kind of sad, to be honest. I mean, this is something that when we're working sometimes with certain filmmakers, they want us to maybe digitally remove things or add things or change things because nowadays the technology is there to do it. But we try to avoid that. Like we have to tell them like, no, we want to preserve the original intended version as much as possible. So, this is why like we promote physical media, because when you have that physical copy, they can't alter that on you. Disney Plus did that thing with Splash, right? Where they like,
they've been doing it. They did
doing it all over the place.
Yes.
So because if you buy the Splash from like iTunes, it has the nudity, but if you watch it on Disney Plus, they have like her hair was much longer and it's covering her bum and so forth.
Yeah, that looks so terrible. But they did it with Splash. They made additional edits to Star Wars. And just recently, matter of fact, they changed it back because of the uproar, but they did a change to Falcon and Winter Soldier as well.
Really?
One of the guys that was killed, they turned it to where, he was just knocked out. And they've switched it back. But go ahead.
There's another interesting thing, too, is that, like, for example, when they were doing War of the Worlds, the 1958, I think it is, version, and when it went on Blu-ray, Criteria, I think it was, and you could actually see the strings holding the pods, and they were thinking of removing that because again it wasn't intentionally there to see, and if the technology was there, the director wouldn't want those strings to be seen. So they had that big debate whether or not should they even fix something like that or not, because it's altering the film, even though you can assume the director and the producer and all the folks back then would say, yeah, get rid of it. If we had that technology back then, we don't want it in there. Now, especially now that you get, 4K discs and HD and all this other stuff. So it is a curiosity because that's a different type of editing versus say, what you guys were talking about with Star Wars and Splash and Eyes Wide Shut and whatever else.
E.T. with
E.T. is another one. Yeah.
But what's weird is, I grew up, like I say, in the 70s and 80s, and
Spielberg changed it back, by the way, to the guns.
In the original Star Trek from the 60s. Now they've redone those so that the planets look more like planets and like the backgrounds look more like planets. And it's like, why do we have to update everything? Why can't we enjoy it for what it was when it was there and not mess with this stuff? And again, I'm a firm believer of leave it alone, except for in your case where you find a movie that wasn't finished, obviously, that you can't leave it alone because you got to try to make sense of it and put it together. But it's like, let's not, change The Godfather. Like he doesn't have an orange now. He's got an apple. Like, what I'm saying? Like, why are we changing something that's been this way forever? But again, the whole Star Wars thing just makes me really, really ill.
Well,
just leave it alone.
And Kurtis, you're absolutely right. Physical media, that's, you love a movie, you need to buy the physical media. That's like Star Wars. I own the original Laserdisc versions with a Laserdisc player, to play the the original one. And it's just, nobody can take that away from me.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is like what they're doing a lot of now, like you said, is updating the visual effects, which like honestly does a disservice to the original creators of the effects. I mean, somebody created those, whatever planets or whatever it was that for whatever movie. And sure, like it may not stand by like today's visual effects, but there was a certain look and a certain vibe. And actually, I think when they add the digital effects to sometimes older films, it almost stands out more because you're so used to the look of like a matte painting or something like that, where, that's just what would be done at that time. And it's sad because like matte painting was an art form, and to just have somebody maybe come in and digitally alter it to make it look better, it's like you're just kind of almost spitting on somebody's artwork.
Yeah, like they painted on glass, and they had the shot cut out that they framed for the live action, and everything else around it was like some guy's artwork that was phenomenal, and the action happened in that one part of the glass that wasn't. And now they're like, no, that looks dumb. Let's this guy was an artist, but we don't care about him anymore. His work is dumb. We're going to make it better. And yeah, it's kind of a slap into the face to the pioneers of who made movies in the beginning or whatever. I totally agree with what you said.
Well, like the criterion for War of the Worlds, they decided at the end to leave the things there, the strings, even though if you watched it in its original, 38 millimeter or whatever it was, you can't see it because it's not as HD.
Right.
But they decided not to alter it, and they just went HD and left it there.
I forgot what I was going to say.
Well, actually, I'm going to say one other thing, because when it comes to New York Ninja, that was actually a big thing, was to not alter anything. Like, I used just footage that was there, and the only thing that is not original was obviously the credits, because those had to be created after the fact. And there's I don't want to give away too much. It has something to do with the ending, but there's an explosion near the end of the movie, and the explosion is because partly because the ending wasn't finished being filmed, and I had to find a way to end it. But what I did was, again, I don't want to give away the ending, so I'm not going to really say too much. But what basically I was like, I need to figure out how to end this. And then there's a movie called The Executioner Part 2, which is another movie that 21st Century Distribution released, and Vinegar Syndrome has put it out. And while I was working on New York Ninja and trying to figure out, how am I going to end this movie, because the ending isn't really finished, I happen to have The Executioner Part 2 on in the background, and there's a stock footage explosion in the movie. And I was like, oh, well, if I was an editor in the 80s, if I worked for 21st Century Distribution, nice, and I didn't know how to end this movie, I would have just taken that stock footage explosion. And the good thing is we had the film elements for Executioner Part 2. So we just scanned that explosion, and then I overlaid it over the scene that I needed it to. So it's a cheesy effect, but it also is period appropriate and worked for the time. But yeah, other than that, everything is original, and that was something that we were very strict on, because we've actually had people try to bring us like films from the 80s that weren't finished, and then they finished them now, and they always add digital effects. There was one that somebody brought in, I don't even remember the name of it, but they added digital rain and digital blood, and it's like, you kind of just ruined the fun of the movie, like, we might have been interested, but not anymore.
How long have you been doing this, my friend?
Doing what, filmmaking?
Yeah.
Well, so I've been working for Vinegar Syndrome. I think I'm going on 4 years now. And then, so I'm 40, and I've been doing filmmaking, kind of since a kid. But, I didn't actually go to like full film school, but I took film courses at NYU when I was like 25. So basically that's when I would say I tried to pursue it as a career, was at like 25. So 15 years. 15 years.
It's amazing though. Like, some things school can teach you and college can teach you, but other things, if you just have a passion for it and you want to learn it and you want to figure it out, and it seems like this is your thing and you want this stuff to work, that nothing can hold a person back who just wants to do this thing. So again, I admire the hell out of what you've done with, this movie. And that's all, we had somebody on a show a couple of weeks back, and I said the editor really is the person who makes a movie, because you got the writer who has their vision and they pass it off to somebody, and you bring in a director and you get some actors and he's like, okay, action, do this, do that, and then it's all filmed, and then they got to give it to this guy who's got to take all those pieces, and if you cut too soon or too late, that's like where it falls apart. So to be able to take somebody else's vision and edit it is just, it's amazing. So
yeah. Well, yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. So it's interesting because I did an interview for a Movie Maker magazine for their website a few months back, and they wanted me to kind of talk about, like, obviously New York Ninja, but a little bit about like my career leading up to it, and like like how did I get to where I am right now, and without going through my whole history, but I learned to shoot film at NYU, which I think I was like one of the last classes to learn to actually shoot film. After that, it all went to digital. So I'm so glad that I at least got the background on film. But I've been making my own like independent films for a few years now. I have 3 feature films. I've made a ton of shorts, and I made 3 feature films. The feature films are all shot digital because of money. I hope to shoot film one day, but some of my shorts were shot on film. And that was the thing, is like they were all low budget films. So mostly out of necessity, I wanted to be a director, so like that's what I focused on. But out of necessity for budget, I would end up writing them, because then I could write for the budget that I needed. Then I would direct it, and then most of the time I ended up editing it, because once again, budget. And when you know the footage and the mistakes that you've made, how you can fix those mistakes in the editing room. And so what I didn't really realize is, basically, while I was doing all these independent films and I was basically trying to fix my own mistakes, I didn't know that would become like the biggest tool for me when I was doing New York Ninja. I had no idea this project was going to end up like falling in my lap, basically. So like the writing and the editing were like the 2 things that I did just so I could be a director. But those 2 things became the most important part of New York Ninja. So, that's something that I talked about, is like, I never really considered myself an editor. Like, I was hired at Vinegar Syndrome to do editing, to do restoration, and to edit special features and all that. But to me, editing was always just kind of a necessity to get the film done. But what I've really realized is that, like, the importance of editing over time is something that like I like call myself an editor now when I didn't before, So
yeah, I mean, that's got to be the hardest part. And I don't think a lot of people realize how freaking tough 35 millimeter film is. I used to work at a movie theater, and I'd have to cut the movies together for showing and then take them apart. And if the projector jammed up, the film wouldn't break. It would like literally go, and the whole freaking thing would start smoking, because that film does not break. Like, it is so ridiculously tough. But I learned a lot about editing. Like, if you have to splice on a dark scene, you can't really tell where the cut line is. So I'd always be a half a frame off. So then you'd have to go fix it or whatever. Yeah. So that was never fun. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, like everything we were just talking about, visual effects and all that. And it's like, don't get me wrong, the stuff that people do today is amazing, and there's definitely an artistry to it. But then if you look at filmmaking back in the day when it was all shot on film, everybody, they had some kind of skill, whether it was, the editors actually physically editing the film together. And even things like we were talking about the other day, like a focus puller on set. Nowadays you have monitors, you have things that help you track the focus. You can even like lock in the focus so that it'll follow certain people. But back in the day, you had to do that by eye sometimes, or just by measurements. First ACs didn't always have a monitor to even work off of. They had to eyeball it and go off of measurements and keep focus during these really difficult scenes. It's like there's just so much artistry that goes into filmmaking that I think sometimes people forget. They just watch a movie, or they watch a scene and they're like, yeah, that was cool. But like, the level of work and the amount of people that it takes to put a film together is crazy.
Well, that's why the credits at the end of most movies are so long, and most people leave.
Yeah.
But every single one of those people had to do something to make this movie come out. But everybody's like, "Oh my God, Jim Carrey was awesome in that movie, wasn't he?" And it's like, dude, he just went in and read a couple lines and then went to his trailer. Like all those other names were the ones who really made this movie what it is, and people like literally forget that. And most people don't even know where the focus puller is. So I'm glad you explained that. And we lost.
Phil messaged me. He's having some internet issues.
Gotcha.
So they had to reboot his modem. We're a little over time anyway, but I wanted to make sure we got a couple other questions in. So during your work on this movie, did you go back and rewatch any of the 80s ninja movies? And if you did, which ones did you do?
I mean, that's all I did was watch. So like whenever I'm working on a movie, I try to watch as much within that genre as possible to just stay in the mind frame. I actually didn't know when I started New York Ninja that it would be like a 2-year process. So basically for 2 years, all I did for the most part was watch like ninja movies and like kung fu movies, which I'm a fan of both of those genres to begin with. So I had, quite the collection of them to begin with. But yeah, I mean, well, obviously the ones that are brought up the most are always like the Shokazuki ones. So Enter the Ninja, Revenge of the Ninja. I think Revenge of the Ninja is probably the best 80s ninja movie.
Nice.
Ninja 3, The Domination, which has actually the banner for that movie is in New York Ninja, which was crazy. So that's it's like meta without even trying to be meta. The American Ninja movies, like all the canon stuff, which is obviously what they were trying to do here. But then just like the old school kung fu movies too. I told you I was watching a lot of them for the dubbing and all that kind of thing. But then again, the Italian films actually ended up becoming more of an inspiration for that. But just staying in that mind frame as much as possible. I watched a lot of Godfrey Ho movies. I don't know if you guys know who he is. No. So I'll just mention it because a lot of people basically say New York Ninja is like a lost Godfrey Ho film. So Godfrey Ho is a really interesting filmmaker, and one of the things that he did, if you look at his IMDb, his filmography, he has hundreds of movies, and he might have like 12 movies that would come out in 1 year, and they were almost all these like ninja movies. So he'd have like 12 ninja movies that came out in 1 year, and you're like, well, how did this guy shoot 12 ninja movies in 1 year? And I guess that there's an interview where he's like, he doesn't even know how many movies he made, and it was partly because so he would direct his own movies, but he knew the ninja craze was big, especially in the 80s. So he would shoot these like ninja action scenes, and then he would buy like other movies from like Taiwan or Singapore or something where like they were, they didn't do well. They were these dramas or whatever. And then he'd intercut and make like these ninja movies out of these other movies that he bought the rights to. So, and sometimes you'd see the same fight scenes in some of these movies, but some of them are actually really good movies. If anybody wants to give themselves a headache, do a deep dive on Godfrey Ho's filmography. There's definitely, you will be pleasantly surprised by some of them. I had fun watching them. So
there's a cool Netflix documentary. I think it's called Hard Hits and Kung Fu Kicks.
Okay. Yeah.
Which covers a lot of the 80s kung fu movies, and actually researching for tonight, I didn't realize that John Liu, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was Bruce Lee offered him a villain role in Enter the was it not Enter the Dragon? Game of Death.
Yes. Yeah.
And he turned it down.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know John Liu. We were never able to find him, so we think he's still alive, but we're not 100% sure. He has sort of an interesting career where it's like it seemed like he had the opportunity to take off and never really did. So I don't know if it was just maybe I don't want to talk ill of him, but maybe it was an arrogance thing. I don't really know. Maybe that's why he decided to go make his own movies instead. I really don't know, but I will say there's a movie called The Secret Rivals, which he is in. If you've never seen that, for the Kung Fu fans out there, definitely check out The Secret Rivals. He has incredible leg work in that movie. And then another one called Invincible Armor, which is kind of probably one of his most famous movies. Wu-Tang sampled some of the dialogue for one of their songs. So if you're a Wu-Tang fan, you'll pick up on some of the dialogue in there. But yeah, anything like that, I try to watch as much stuff as I could during that time period. So
one final question for you. Do you have any projects coming up and down the road?
Well, I don't. So, well, I have a feature film, my third feature film, which is The Dead Girl in Apartment 3, that I shot, wrote, produced, directed, all that. That should be coming out hopefully this year. I think Wild Eye is putting that out. Well, I know Wild Eye is putting it out. I just don't know. I said I think because I'm not sure which month it's supposed to be coming out. But Adrian King from Friday the 13th is in it. So that was fun. But that was already shot. Am I currently working on anything? No, I'm not. I'm in the process of trying to get a few things going. Really, I've just been doing a lot with New York Ninja, going to screenings. I'm actively looking for another unfinished film. I had actually a lot of fun doing this, and I'd like to do it again. I know nothing is going to be quite like New York Ninja, so if we find another film, I'm going to kind of choose wisely, but I would love to find an unfinished horror film. That's like my next dream project. So and in the meantime, I'm doing some writing and I'm talking to some people, and hopefully I can get an original production going. So
now, when you filmed your movie with Adrian King, where did you shoot that?
In Connecticut, which is where I'm from.
You normally shoot your independent stuff in that area?
Yeah. So I basically, it's low budget filmmaking 101 is, shoot for the areas that or write for the areas so I write my scripts for locations that I know I can get access to. So but yeah, so that was all three of my films. I'll just give a shout out to them. So there's a movie called Sheepskin, which was released through Unearthed Films, a movie called The Devil's Well, which is like a found footage horror film if you're into that kind of thing, that was released through Wild Eye, and then The Dead Girl in Apartment 3. Those are my three features, and they were all shot in Connecticut. So
whereabouts in Connecticut?
Mostly around the Waterbury area, which is where I'm from. So
nice. That's funny. I'm from Waterbury, Vermont.
I'm sure there's a big difference between the two.
I usually say this to the end, but I wrote a book, and actually in this book, in the very first chapter, it says that Waterbury, Vermont was named after Waterbury, Connecticut. So some people, I guess, came from that area and settled in, say, hey, let's call it Waterbury or whatever. So I think Waterbury got their name from Waterbury, Connecticut.
That's funny. Yeah.
If
you've seen it in my movies, I shoot in like warehouses, things of that nature. So it's like if you've ever been to Waterbury, there's definitely a lot of abandoned buildings, things of that nature. So obviously you have to get permission to shoot in those places. I don't shoot guerrilla. Like I say low budget, but I try to run like professional sets as much as possible. But there are a lot of there used to be a lot of industry in Waterbury that doesn't exist anymore. So you can get access to like warehouses and stuff like that, where sometimes I've built sets in these places and shot in them and stuff like that. So it's, you use what you can,
Yeah. I live in Springfield, Vermont now, but back in 86, 87, 88, when I was living in Waterbury, Vermont, I took a Greyhound bus to Long Island. Some friends of mine moved out there, and I went through Waterbury, Connecticut, and I was in a bus and I was scared. I was looking out the window going, this don't look like Waterbury, Vermont.
I like it. Hey, it's got character. The city's got character.
New York and Waterbury of the 80s.
Yeah.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Hope this bus don't break down.
I did see, a matter of fact, I haven't seen the movie since the 80s when it came out, but I saw Vinegar Syndrome. You have Cloak and Dagger coming out soon.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we just announced
with Dabney
that.
Coleman?
Yeah, we just announced that like a week ago. Yeah, we've been working hard on the restoration for that one, and we're pretty proud of it. It looks really good.
Oh, that's awesome. I'll have to grab that one.
Why can't I think of the kid from E.T.'s name?
Henry Thomas.
Thank you. I'm like, I see him, and he's a crybaby, and that's how he got his role, because he interviewed for Spielberg and just started crying, and he's like, kid, you got the part.
Well, it's funny that you say that. I learned something in the special features. We found like an archival interview with Richard Franklin, and that was one of the things he was saying was that Henry Thomas could just cry and kill.
Yeah.
And like his mother didn't even know how he would do it. You know, he would just, because Richard Franklin was saying he didn't know how to really direct a kid during an emotional scene. So he, you know, this was his words. He went up to him and was like, you know, I need you to cry in this next scene. Like, can you do that? And I guess Henry Thomas was like, sure, roll the camera, and then and just did it. So
well, yeah, his interview with Spielberg for E.T., he's like, you're gonna take my dog, and he's crying, and like it was so emotional, and he goes, why are you gonna do this or whatever? And Spielberg's like, yeah, you got the job.
Yeah.
I must have rented that movie like a dozen times on VHS when I was a kid.
Cloak and Dagger.
Yeah.
For anybody that's listening who hasn't seen it, you know, they don't make them like that anymore. When you
don't
see
hear much from Dabney Coleman anymore. I think he's still around, but he did a lot of stuff back in the day. You know, him and Matthew Broderick. Not that they were in the same things together, but they both seem to be doing a lot of stuff. And then they kind of just, you know. But
well, it's just when you watch it now. I mean, it's like there's guys there's hitmen trying to kill a kid. Because he has top secret information. Like, you know, and there's guns and all this other, and it's like you wouldn't see that in a kid's movie nowadays. So
I know that's because we can't. Oh, we get so sensitive. Like I said, I'll take 80s movies over anything they're putting out today. I don't care CGI or whatever you got going on today. There's nothing like the 80s movies.
Yeah,
70s, 80s. The way they shot them, the way I don't know. There's just something about them that just can't. You know, we tried to get better, and I think we got worse. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
But yeah, Cloak and Dagger, I'll have to check that out because that was one of my favorites.
Yeah, totally. And you can find out more about Vinegar Syndrome in the show notes up above or down below. And Stephen, did you have any questions before we wrap things up?
Nope, not really.
Okay. RW, any last questions?
I think I talked enough, but I appreciate you being here, though. And like I said, I'd love to check out your studio or, you know, see what you're doing sometime. But
So people going down to visit Vinegar Syndrome, what can they see there? Can they see any of the work happening, or is it just a store?
Yeah, I mean, we don't really let like the public into the actual restoration area, mostly because there's films and stuff like that, and you know, NDAs. We can't really always talk about what's in our building, but for anybody who at least wants to come down and see where we are, we actually have a store called The Archive, and if you're into physical media, definitely check it out.
Great store.
Vinyl, Blu-ray, there's laser discs, tapes, cassettes, everything. So you know, we love that kind of stuff. It's a cool store. They don't make them like that anymore either. So,
so you're saying I can't see where the magic happens? Is that what you're saying, Curtis?
Maybe. Well, you might have it in. You know.
Okay. I was about to call Will Smith, so I just was.
I'm just saying, like, you know,
if somebody I wanted to get the Will Smith joke in there.
Yeah. I just don't want people to think they could come in and actually see.
Right. No, I know.
It's we keep things pretty locked up around
here.
That's
as you should. Yeah,
totally. So Curtis, where do you like people interacting with you on social media?
I mostly do Instagram because it's the only one that's still fun. I feel like the rest of social media has gotten not so much fun anymore. So I don't do Twitter. I don't know. I do Facebook, but yeah, Instagram, honestly, because I try to post stuff about New York Ninja a lot and about films, and I think it's a lot more fun. So check me out there.
Cool beans. Social media is definitely
maybe it'll write itself at some point, you know.
It will. Every now and then there's like a resurgence, you know, like MySpace had a peak, then it died, and everybody moved to Facebook, and then kind of like the websites like Dig, and then everybody moved to Reddit. So it's it'll all write itself. But for me, just Google Leo Pond. You find a bunch of stuff. Could be true, could be not. I'm not gonna say which is which, but I run a little thing called the Dorkening Podcast Network. We got about 40 shows on a network, so there's a ton of awesome people doing a ton of awesome stuff. Head on over to thedorkening.com, which you can check out all the episodes for all the shows there. And Stephen, where do you like people interacting with you?
You can find our podcasts, Super Retro Throwback Reviews and CSI The Vegas Files. Both shows are on the Dorkening Podcast Network. And this isn't a mirage. Usually I'm on the Dorkening on Wednesdays. I only made an appearance tonight for our guest because we've had him on our show before. But you can find me on with Leo and crew every Wednesday night, except for this Wednesday because I'm working. But check out our Patreon as well. We had a very exclusive Patreon interview a few months ago with Kurtis talking about New York Ninja. I think we went about 40 minutes, if I'm right, Kurtis. Correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, check out New York Ninja. Check out the archive if you're in Connecticut. I cannot praise this movie enough. Kurtis has heard me praise it to the moon and back. So, but yeah, check out my podcast and check out the Dorkening Podcast Network since I'm a part of that as well.
Awesome. RW.
Hold on, I'm stalking Kurtis right now. 1 second. Come here. Oh, sorry. You can find me at officialrwmartin.com. There's links to my Facebook, my Twitter, my Tenor, my Cameo, whatever. And please go to Amazon.com, pick up Life Inside My Head, A Scattered Tale Living with ADHD, and learn about my life. They're actually, I was like, they're blank pages. No, they're not. And that's it, man. And again, follow these people because they're awesome.
Awesome. And Jeremy, we wish you well. I'm trying to message you, see if you're okay. But with that, we'll catch you guys later. Bye.